Attention, please. We are live on YouTube. Anna, have you sent some test captions yet? There we go. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think that the people who are in central office have lost connection. So I apologize. There might be some internet connectivity issues. Please hang tight.
The time is now 6:20 and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Due to the current CDC regulations, the board members may be participating via Zoom for this meeting. I'd like to welcome those of you who are participating via Zoom and those watching the board meeting via live streaming on YouTube. The link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. If the board is on break or in closed session, the screen will fade to black and the sound will be muted. In the event there is a disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We have Mr. Frank Otero participating via Zoom. Mr. Otero, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
If I put my earpiece on, I can hear you too. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. In the room, I can hear you, but not through your microphone.
Do we need to look at that, John? Because I don't think, Mr. Vickers, can you hear me?
I'm fine.
Thank you.
I'm fine.
Okay. Dr. Romero, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Dr. Romero, will you please announce the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. President. This meeting has been announced in accordance with the open meetings resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Board of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Dr. Romero, since you were speaking, oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Elder, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Elder. That will bring us to item number 4. Dr. Romero, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. President, I do not recommend or see a need for any changes to the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. I'll stand for a motion on the agenda.
Mr. President, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Hidon to approve the agenda as presented by Dr. Romero and his staff. I will stand for a second.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Frank Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That will bring us to item number 5, approval of the consent items. I will stand for a motion regarding the consent items.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve all the consent items with the exception of the MOU.
I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to approve all of the consent items with the exception of item number 13E.
Mr. President, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Hidon. I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to approve the consent items with the exception of item number 13E and a second by Mr. Eloy Hidon. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That will bring us to item number 7, Superintendent's Report. I will turn this over to Dr. Romero.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, everyone, to our board meeting tonight. I have a few items to go over tonight. I'm going to try to be brief and quick. First, I'd like to welcome a guest that we have here tonight, Chief Gabaldon. He's Chief of Police for Los Lunas Fire. I wanted to invite him here tonight just to talk a little bit about the partnership that we have here in Valencia County when it comes to our vaccine distributions. I want to, before I turn it over to him for just a few minutes, I want to say thank you to him and his team, along with our local Department of Health, for all the work that they've done for the citizens in our community with Valencia County, but also for all the help that they've done for Las Lunas schools. But to talk a little bit about the partnership and the hard work that we have all accomplished together in this partnership, I want to turn it over to Chief Gabaldon for a few minutes. And it's all yours, Chief Gabaldon. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Dr. Romero. Thank you, Mr. President and Board. Appreciate you having me here tonight. Also the fire chief, not the police chief, Dr. Romero.
Did I say police chief? Oh.
Hey guys,
you know what? I think I'm gonna do that every time with you, Chief Gabaldon.
I have to give you a hard time. So anyways, guys, I appreciate you having me here tonight. I wanted to give you an update, and I think it's long overdue. We have been in this pandemic for about a year right now. And we started this partnership that we have with the schools really about 4 years ago. And it started with school security and safety. Since then, we've moved on to now this. And it's been a great partnership that has just evolved into something that I think we can have for the years to come. When we started this pandemic, we started off, with some meetings and some talks about how are we going to get past this? And, how are we going to get ahead of this, should we say? And really, it was early on, it was obvious that if we want to get our kids back and we want to get our community back, that we needed to continue this partnership that was created with, not only the group we have here, but even previous administrations, and move forward with this. So we started by doing COVID testing. And we built a program around COVID testing at the high schools. And those of you guys that had the opportunity to go through and get this stick swabbed up your nose, then you got to see our setup over there at the high schools in several different locations. From there, from the beginning, way back in this time last year, we knew that vaccine was going to be what's going to get us out of this. And our setups were always geared towards a vaccine. So it came natural for the discussions to happen in December when we found out they were coming. Since then, we have partnered with the public health office, and I say the Blend Public Health Office, but it's really both our public health offices, 2 nurses, and we have the Village of Los Lunas Fire Department, the Village of Los Lunas as a whole. We've utilized library staff, Parks and Rec staff, Los Lunas PD. We've used the Valencia County Fire Administration, firefighters, and emergency management. And then we've also had some Blend schools. But today, for today's platform, I think it's very important that we know what your staff has been doing for us and doing for the county as a whole, and really being a major player in getting us back to what's going to be our normal. And I think it's important to know that we've had since December or January 1, we've had at least anywhere up from about 8 health staff helping us, and that's about 6 nurses and 2 health staff assistants. We've also had anywhere from 5 to 12 security officers that have been helping us with traffic flow. And those of you that have an opportunity to go to the Blue School and see that setup, they have really made that a premier location in Valencia County because of its operations. In fact, today we have the National Guard helping us. The National Guard has been able to come into the setup into our program and really understand how it works and be a key player in the site safety for those that are coming in. And I think it'd be wrong of me not to mention that the Blue School, we've been given the opportunity to utilize that on a regular basis. And that allows us to have the Blue School available at any given time to use for vaccine distribution. And that's been one of our easiest sites to use because, as you know, this time of the year, this weather comes. Think about tomorrow, we might get some snow, right? We might be down south, and there's a good chance our staff's going to be outside in the weather. Here in Los Lunas at this site, it's nice that we are able to be indoors, and also too, we're able to leave the supplies, and there's a lot less setup. The Blend School District, we've had their nurses and their security as well helping us. And if it hasn't been for both schools, honestly, this team would not be what it is today. And I think your commitment and your staff's commitment to this has been the reason why we have made these milestones of vaccine distribution. If you think about it, as a county, we have 29,000 people that have received at least one single dose of vaccine. This group has been part of nearly 13,000 of those doses that have gone out. Today, we were able to do over 750 doses. So, I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to meet some of your staff, but we have Nurse Jackie that has helped us from the beginning of this. Her commitment, it's unmatched, and the rest of the staff, your staff has so much energy. They actually calm down folks that show up for the vaccine. They welcome them to come in with open arms. So when people come into our sites, they're excited to receive the vaccine. They're happy. I have seen Facebook posts of just nothing but great reviews, and it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for your staff and the rest of the staff, the energy that they bring. And I think if you think about it, on the 19th, I don't know if you received that email that went out, but 1 million doses were given in the state. We're leading the state, and this team has been part of that. And I think it's something to be proud of. I'm proud of it. I'm proud to not only be the fire chief, I'm proud to be part of this community. I'm proud that my kids are part of this school district, and I know that they're safe and you guys have their best interests. So I just want to thank you guys for that. And I'm happy to be part of this.
Chief Gabaldon, again, thank you for all your commitment to this. I mean, you are the person to bring all this together, and I want to thank you for that. But I also want to let the board know that not only has Chief Gabaldon been instrumental with his team in providing these vaccines for citizens across our county, but also he's been instrumental in helping us get ready for reentry. This is the gentleman that's been coming into our schools to be able to make sure that our schools are safe for students to return. And in a little bit, I'm going to be talking about some of those reentry dates. But again, Chief Gabaldon, I want to thank you for all your hard work, because not only on top of you doing, a monumentous task of vaccine distribution across our county, but you've also helped us get ready for reentry. So thank you for all that hard work.
Dr. Romero, thank you. And I think I forgot to, it would be wrong of me to not mention yourself, Mr. Baca. You guys have been there, several of the other staff, and I wish I remember everybody's names, but we received support. You guys have helped us out. You guys came together and, brought some food to the group. And I think, food is the way to our heart, right? And it was great for us, and we appreciate that. And, Valencia County, they've been bringing us some food lately. And, the administration of Valencia County has stepped up and tried to get us some food out there. The library has brought snacks over there, and the community has brought snacks. So really, guys, I look forward to our continued relationship, because we can't do this without you guys. Honestly, if we were to lose, let's say, even a third of the staff that have been helping us, the vaccine distribution goes down substantially. And our goal is to really get prepared for our next school year. We know we're coming back in now, but we would love for these kids to come in next year and have a successful school year and know that their families are safe. And just really, I think it's only going to be possible with the partnerships that we've had in the team. Really, it's become a team. And I think in the years to come, I'm proud to be part of this, and I look forward to see what it's also going to turn into, because I don't think it's going to end here. Our partnerships can only grow and just get stronger.
I absolutely agree, Chief Gabaldon. Once we get through this pandemic, we're going to have our next challenge in front of us, but I'm looking forward to doing that with you. And you know what? We all do the same work. We're trying to take care of our community, and thank you for all your hard work. I wanted to just give a moment to the board to see if they have any questions or comments on this partnership.
So thank you for joining us, Chief Gabaldon. And I want to commend you and everybody I was lucky enough to get both of my vaccinations at the Blue School. And I went through that process. And when I got my first shot, I went home and I told my wife, if you gave these guys enough vaccine to vaccinate Valencia County, they'd have it done in 8 hours with a lunch break. I really believe that, because of the way that it flowed, and everybody knew their job. And it was one of the first times you probably did the vaccine there, and it was so smooth. I was extremely impressed with the collaborative effort. And you're right, I saw people there from Belen, from Los Lunas, I saw PDs, I saw the fire department. This last time on the second shot, I saw the National Guard there. You guys have done a tremendous job. And the people that are vaccinated in this county owe you guys a debt of gratitude, because it is amazing the way you had that thing rolling. So kudos to you guys. We rely on you. Keep up the good work. You say that you're proud of everybody. We're proud of you as well, because you're doing a great service to our community. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for what you did. You did a great job. Board members?
Mr. President, members of the board, Chief Gobelon. I got to witness one day the vaccines. These guys had 4 cars wide in front of Century High School in that parking lot. And I think is it safe to say maybe you had like 500 people on one day?
Yeah, today we had 780.
Okay, I think that day they said there was 500 and they got it done within an hour and a half. And I remember last year, the motto was, we're all in this together. And like Board President Smith said that he's seen Valencia Sheriff's Office there or PD, all these other entities there. And all that showed was everybody was in this together. And it was real humbling getting to see that and to see that process. Thank you guys. I mean, there's so many shout outs to give, but thank you guys.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Frank Otero.
I just want to make my comments to Chief Gabaldon and the staff of the schools. I was fortunate to get the Johnson & Johnson a little over a week ago, and we haven't been around the schools much, and it's tough because you don't see employees, and it was a chance for me to see some people that I've known a long time and meet new staff, and then also to see the collaboration, if you want to call it, along with Chief Gabaldon and there's just so many people. I can't even name them all, but it really is encouraging to see that people are willing to. And I made that comment to Mr. Baca at the time. Was the pandemic in a lot of cases has made a lot of people more cooperative, and they're willing to go out of their way and do jobs that are not in their job line. And for the fire department, they used to be called the fire department, and now I think they call them fire and rescue. And I guess in the future they're going to be fire rescue and epidemics, I guess, because your job is growing, and along with the schools, because we, the school systems. When I say we, the school systems are a key keystone in our community, and so we're looking forward to and it is funny that you mentioned children's safety. I mentioned that to a parent recently. We were dealing hot on that issue when the pandemic broke out, and so we'll have to go back to and revisit that issue very, very quick. But thank you all very much. Thank you, the staff, and this is just so encouraging. Thank you.
Fire Chief Gabaldon, thank you so much for everything. I'm probably gonna get a little bit of teasing from you because I called you police chief, but I can take it. So thank you for everything, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Dr. Romero, thank you. And please, if you guys get an opportunity to speak with the Blend schools, they've been a great partner as well too. So we've had our differences, right? But we've come together as one community. And Mr. Otero, I think he said a lot there. And we have really great relationships right now with the school staff. So it's great to see everybody working together. So thank you guys. Be safe.
Thank you, Chief Gabaldon. Have a good night. All right, I'm going to move on right now to just some reentry updates for everyone. If we can move to the Las Lunas Schools website, the home page, and I really want to actually walk families through some information that we have and let you know where this is at. This is going to be our home page right here. You can see there's a tab right there in the middle of the screen that says Las Lunas Blended Learning. This is going to be everything that you need to know about returning to school, whether you are as a remote learner or as an in-person learner. So let's really quickly just click on kind of roll over remote learning. And you can see there, these are all many of the resources we've given to families over the last few weeks and months about how we are looking at using remote learning. We're continually updating this information. And I want to just point that out to everyone to continue to make sure that if you are going to be staying in a remote learning environment, this is your go-to place for all the information you need to know about remote learning. But I wanted to focus this evening on the in-person learning. And so let's go ahead and roll over that one. And you can see here that there's a plan for reopening. Let's go over to the right, and you can see all of the schools there are highlighted there that you can actually go to your specific school site to be able to see the re-entry plan specific to that school. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you to click on plan for reopening. And that's going to take us to some information that I think is going to be vital for all of us here tonight. Just scroll down just a little bit. You can see here that we are looking at a full reentry with our students on April 6th. That's coming up really quickly. And you can see there, this is through May 26th. That's the last day of school. I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are continually updating our information based on health orders. So keep checking this website to get the latest information. But as you can see here, starting April 6th, we are going to be starting school Monday through Friday. And you can see here, you can see the hours of operation for each of these school sites. So make sure you find your child's school so you know what time school starts and what time school ends. I'm going to point out a couple of things here. One is we typically have 2 start times and 2 end times for our schools. We're actually moving to 3 start times and the end times. And the reason for that is really twofold. One, it allows us to be able to have more buses running kids with fewer students on them. So we are able to social distance a little bit better and a little bit more on those buses. You can also see that we have a little bit of an early release each day, Monday through Friday. And that's going to allow for teachers to be able to have some time to plan, because there are additional time to plan because they will be working in both a virtual and a in-person environment. It's also going to allow our classroom teachers to be able to work with interventions and contact families and allow us to do some deep cleaning every single day. So I wanted to make sure that everybody had these times so that they could make sure they knew what time school would be starting and what time school would be ending. Buses, if you are a bus rider, we're going to be working hard to be having students dropped off about 15 minutes prior to the start date. And there's going to be some staggered drop-off times. When I say staggered drop-off times, we're really talking about 3, 4, 5 minute staggered times so that we can have those students enter or exit the bus and enter the school. And we're going to have as minimal buildup as possible when we're checking students in for the health screenings. If you are being dropped off or you are walking, to please try to time that so that you're no earlier than 15 minutes prior to the start of school. And also, this is going to be important that if you are a visitor to schools, if you're a parent, if you're visiting the school for any reason, you're not going to be allowed on campus. You will have access to the front office area. If you're there for an IEP, if you're there for a meeting, you will have access to the conference room up front, but we're really going to be maintaining the integrity of the cohort of students and teachers. And so we want to be able to really control the human contact on campus. Let me scroll down just a little bit. And these are going to be some of the supplies that are going to be required as students start to come back in. One of them is to wear a multi-layered mask. And this, you can see an example of all of us in the board wearing an example of that multi-layered mask. I'm also going to say, maybe have one to wear and one as a backup in your backpack. But do know that if you do, for some reason forget one, one gets dirty, you lose it, we will have plenty of extras at school sites for students to use. Also, I've been getting some questions about supplies. If you want to go ahead, we can go ahead and use those student backpacks that I know that many of you purchased back in August. And we're also going to be very specific and intentional about not sharing supplies. So that's going to mean things like pencils, crayons, markers, calculators, things like that. So we are going to ask that everyone does have their individual supplies. We're also asking that students are able to bring a water bottle each day, or even better, just a refillable water bottle. And that's something that students can use every single day. What we aren't going to have in use are the water fountains where you kind of go down and you're going to take a drink out of the water fountain. Many of our school sites do have refill stations, but we don't have that at all of our school sites now. You're going to start to see those be implemented more and more over the coming days and weeks. And also the big one's going to be technology. We've learned a lot about how we can use technology to really improve outcomes for students and really increase equity opportunities for students across our district. We're going to continue to do that. This is going to be something that you're not going to see going away. When we think about some of the positives that we've learned over the last few weeks and months, this is one of them. So make sure that you are bringing your technology. That's going to be your laptop, your iPads, whatever that may be. Also make sure you bring those chargers, and we're going to try to get students in the habit of making sure they bring a fully charged device every single morning. So let's go on a little bit more about what to expect. And so as students are getting ready to ride the bus, and you're going to get more information about this soon, but I want to give you a little bit of a heads up that we will be sending emails home to families to do a home health check. And what we're going to be asking families to do is complete this prior to leaving for school in the day. This is really going to be like your ticket to be able to get on the bus to do that home health check every morning. We do know that some families don't have email addresses. We're going to have a backup plan for that. We're going to either be able to roll that out through an app or also do some hard copy. So we will find a way to be able to get that to you if you don't have an email address. We're also looking at a reorientation week, and this is actually starting next week. I want to give you a little bit of information about that. Reorientation is really going to be a time for students to come in very small groups to be able to work with their classroom teachers, either in their grade level or through their different departments or classes. And really, there's a few things that we're looking at as a goal during this week. One is to really articulate the reasons for COVID-safe practices. We want to be able to bring in small groups of students and really show them all the changes that we have when it comes to our daily life, how it's going to look like entering the school, what it's going to be like moving through the hallways, what it's going to be like sitting in the classrooms, making sure we're wearing masks, we're social distancing, we're washing hands, what it's like to go to the cafeteria, the library, the playground. All these things are going to be affected slightly so that we're ensuring that we are taking advantage of all those COVID-safe practices. We're also going to be spending a lot of time on SEL skills. This is really relationship building, communication, teamwork. We're also going to be looking at providing opportunities for social emotional learning for our students. And then you're also going to be seeing some opportunities where teachers are going to be doing some really quick assessments on students when it comes to just reading inventories, how they're doing with math, and also to start out what it's going to look like instructionally, how we're going to be working in an environment where we have some students remote and some students in person, and how this is going to blend together in that blended learning environment. We've got some really wonderful examples for our teachers that they're actually building now. And this is going to be an opportunity for students to be able to see that in the classrooms and practice that in small groups before we actually have the larger groups come in on April 6th. Also, to let everyone know that we will be providing grab-and-go meals, both breakfast and lunch. This is going to be whether you are remote or you are in person. We're going to continue to practice those COVID-safe practices at all the school facilities. Everyone is going to be required to wear a mask if you are on campus. That's going to be a non-negotiable. We're also, and I talked about the home health checks, but once you get to campus, you're also going to be going through another health screening as you enter the campus, where we're checking temperatures, and that's going to be for everyone, including staff, visitors, and students. And parents, if your student is not feeling well, if they have a fever, please keep them home. We want to be able to protect this environment as much as we can. Just a little bit about what the instructional day is going to look like for our in-person learners. Of course, we're going to have that direct instruction. We're going to continue to build those COVID routines and procedures to automaticity. We want them to just become second nature about wearing masks, social distancing, the movement throughout the school, and make sure everyone feels comfortable and successful with that. We really want to also establish systems for success as we get into next year. And a lot of that's going to be through building relationships, assessing students, so that we can start next year without a hitch and just take off into some successful opportunities for our students. We also are going to be looking at that blended learning environment, how we work with students at home and in person, using tools such as Canvas and Nearpod. Of course, this is the assessment season. I know there's some questions about that. We want to be able to look at how that's going to fit into our calendar when it comes to some of our summative assessments, but also some of our common formative assessments that we'll be doing really internally, so that we can get some good information on students and make sure that we are closing the gaps on the last 6 weeks that we have with students, which brings us to that instructional acceleration. And I want to talk a little bit about that. When I say acceleration, we want to be able to be very intentional and specific about what we're doing these last 6 weeks of instruction that we have these students right in front of us in person. And we're going to be very focused on what standards we're going to be looking at and focusing on these last 6 weeks. We're also going to be having recess. You're going to see some structured programs such as art, music, library, computer lab, and PE. They're going to be provided for all of our elementary students. You may see some differences based on our resources at different elementary schools as to whether the teacher is going to come to the students or whether the students are going to go to the teacher. There may be some fluctuation based on individual schools. We're going to just a reminder that we're going to continue to use Canvas, and in-person learning will be available, but to contact your schools just for some specific information about what the daily schedules are going to look like. And we're going to try really hard to keep our remote learner schedules as close as possible as to what they're used to, but there's going to be some fluctuation with that as we're bringing some of our in-person learning students back into school. Also, students with IEPs or our special education programs, make sure that you visit with your child's special education teacher or your inclusion support coach. There may be some adjustments to time when they're getting their services. We want to make sure that everybody is very aware about as we're kind of evolving into bringing students back into school. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Students remaining remote. So again, I talked a little bit about this. We will still be giving grab-and-go meals to our students that are remaining remote. It's going to look a lot very similar to what you're used to throughout the year. You will still have opportunities for synchronous and asynchronous learning. That really means live lessons with your teacher, or we're also going to be recording all of our lessons if you're not able to get to that live lesson. Everything will be used through Canvas and Nearpod. There will be opportunities for small group support for our fully remote students. And again, this is going to look very similar for art, music, physical education, library, computer lab. And so we are working really hard to be able to blend these two models together in that blended learning environment. Again, we're going to be doing this in small groups starting next week during what we're calling the Reorientation Week. And then again, we will be starting to bring students back in person on April 6th. If you can go back to the top of the page and go ahead and scroll down to in-person learning and then plan for reopening. And then let's go ahead and just pick one of the schools there. I just want to really quickly look at what reentry plans may look like. And so you're going to see here just some specific guidance for each elementary school, each middle school, and each high school based on start times, when they're going to be having lunch, what it's going to look like throughout the day. And this is very specific to the resources of that school. So make sure you keep parents out there, keep looking at these reentry plans for the latest updates that they have. And then let's go ahead and go back up one more time. I think you might need to go back up to your other tab. And then let's just click on blended learning model, the main one right there. And you scroll down, and this is going to be the page where we have some frequently asked questions. I want to thank all the parents and community out there that's been in contact with me, with the school board, with school principals and teachers about just some common questions. So we're going to keep adding to this list for frequently asked questions. So make sure you come back to this. These are just questions like, what happens if my student gets sick? What are we going to do? Is my child safe? What about transportation? So this is a great place to go to just to get that all around frequently asked questions information. Okay. Let me stop there for just a minute. I'm going to go on to graduation because I know that that's another topic that our community is really needing to know, but I want to stop for just a minute and see if I have any questions or comments from our school board members.
Dr. Romero.
Yes, sir.
Steve Otero here. Is this currently in place or is this a draft? Can anybody access it today?
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Otero. This is actually live on there. We just got it done just within the last couple of hours. So that is actually something that our community can see right now. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, I'll move on to graduation. We can come back to any questions that we may have. So graduation is right around the corner. I know that if you look at our calendar, our school calendar, we have graduation slated for May 22nd. What we have been able to get some updated information from Department of Health and Public Education Department. And what it comes down to is we are going to be looking at graduation based on the color of our county at the time of graduation or 2 weeks prior to graduation. Basically what that says is if we are turquoise or green, we can have indoor or outdoor events. If we are yellow or red, we are required to have an outdoor event. I want to go ahead and err a little bit on the side of caution. I want to make sure that we can plan for just a wonderful experience for our high school seniors. And we're going to be having an outdoor event out at our high school football fields. We've got 3 high schools, Century, Valencia, and Los Lunas High. We are going to be spreading out the days for graduation. So I want to be very clear about this. We were looking at graduations happening on Saturday, May 22nd. We're now going to be looking at graduations taking place over a 3-day event. So on Thursday, May 20th, Century High School will be having their graduation. On Friday, May 21st, Valencia High School will be having their graduation. And on Saturday, May 22nd, Los Lunas High School will be having their graduation. And they will be happening at the football fields. Valencia High School will be at their respective football field. Los Lunas High School will be at their respective football field, and Century High School will be at one of the 2. We don't quite have that nailed down as to what high school they're going to be at, but as soon as we get that nailed down, I will let that community know. All 3 graduations will take place at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it'll be preceded by a robing ceremony prior to the graduation ceremony. Now, a couple more things that people need to know about is that this is going to be an outdoor event. If we are in yellow, we're allowed to have 25% capacity at that event. This is going to allow for us at Valencia High School and Los Lunas High School to right now in a yellow county to be able to bring 2 people per graduate. If we can move into a green, then we can actually we can double that to 4 people per graduate. We're going to try to keep you updated, community, about what that looks like, but because of current health orders, we are going to be limited to that 25% capacity. So I want families to be able to be prepared for that. We are, it's going to look like an event. We look at a 10 o'clock time to try to get into a time frame where it's not too hot, not too cold. We want to try to get ahead of any rain that may happen during those spring May days, also any wind. And we're going to be looking at that robing ceremony happening prior to that. Families are going to get more information to that as we kind of finalize the specifics about the robing ceremony. So with that, board members, I stand for any questions about graduation.
So, Dr. Romero, I just have a real quick comment, and I'm very pleased that you have nailed this down and allowed our community and our families and our graduates to plan ahead. I certainly hope that we get to the point where we can have 4 people per graduate. 2 people per graduate is literally more than I thought we would ever get to. And I have to tell you that I am pleasantly surprised that we are going to be allowed to give this class a graduation. And hopefully we can, as a county, get to where we can have more than 2 people per graduate. But I'm glad that we have these planning things. So just to be sure, regardless of where we go from here as far as the coloring scheme per county, we are having these graduations on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So our families can plan for this today.
You are exactly right, Mr. President. You can count out, we will be having the graduations on May 21st, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. They will be in town. We're going to commit to that. And one thing I forgot to say was, I know that it's not very many people that they can bring in right now. We are limited to that 25% capacity, but we will be live streaming it. And so more information to come on that so that everyone else that isn't able to attend in person, they will at the very least be able to witness it live through YouTube.
Perfect. Thank you. And if those families have paid attention to our board meetings, you can set up your own Zoom meeting and your entire family can participate via Zoom. So we have that to participate for the 2 that are local there. But thank you, board members.
Mr. President, members of the board,
Mr. Hidon.
Dr. Merrill, I'm excited to see it here in Los Lunas. This will mean a lot to the community. You've given the 3 dates, you've given the color coding and the percentages. There's one thing that's hanging over our heads, and it's a promise that we made last year, and you're probably not going to like what I have to say here, but we promised some students from last year that one day that we could have commencements for them, that we would do that. I don't know if we'd be able to do it. I don't know if it's too late in the game, but maybe we can incorporate all 3 schools on one day. I don't know if it's too late. If it's something we can think about, I know it left me a lot of nights with short nights. I didn't get no sleep last year during this May timeframe. And I remember us promising that once we could get those students a commencement, we would do something like that. So I don't know if it's going to be an attainable goal or not, but if that's something we can look at.
Mr. Hidon, I don't have any concrete answer for you now, but definitely we can look at that.
Thank you, Dr. Romero.
Dr. Romero, I think this is pretty exciting, going back to the way it used to be back in the days, to have these kids walk on their own territory and their own ground. I thank you for pushing for this and working with them. I know it's going to be a task for your facilities to set up these 3 graduations one after the other, and hopefully we won't bear any expense and accommodate however we can to make sure that these crews that are working for you don't get overworked from one day to the next day. And I'm sure you have a good plan. So very, very happy to see that it's still, that it's actually in each school's football field. I'd like to see Century High School participate in their own football field, which they don't have, but maybe with the participation of the principal and the seniors, that they might have something to choose. And if it's a football field, that'd be great too. So thank you again, and thank the staff for their hard work in advance. I know it's going to be tough to set up those 3 graduations one after the other. So full speed. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. I guess that's the comments, Dr. Romero.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I think that concludes my superintendent's report, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful week next week for reorientation, having students back on the 6th, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful graduation for our high school seniors. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. That will bring us to item 8 on the agenda, approval to untable item, board reorganization. A, election of officers, and B, appointment to finance and audit committees, tabled at the January 5th, 2021 special meeting. I will stand for a motion on item number 8.
Mr.
Make a
President,
motion we untabled the item that was tabled. When was the date? I'm sorry.
January 5th.
On January 5th.
I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to approve item number 8, untabling the board reorganization, A, election of officers, B, appointment of finance and audit committees, tabled at the July 5th, 2021 special meeting. I will stand for a second.
second.
I have a second by Mr. Eloy Hidon. Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Eloy Hidon, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That will bring us to item number 9, election of officers. The board members elect officers each year. At this time, we will elect the president for the upcoming year. I would stand for a nomination for the office of board president.
I'd like to make a motion that we nominate Eloy Giron as board president.
I have a motion by Mr. Stephen Otero to nominate Eloy Hidon as board president. I'll stand for a second.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Frank Otero. Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. David Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Eloy,
Yes.
congratulations, Mr. Hidon. At this time, I would turn over the gavel to you, which Ms. Wolf will provide you with a new gavel. I will hand you the
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, thank you for this last year of you supporting us as board president. So the next business of order is going to be open. I'll be opening the floor for board vice president.
Mr. President.
Mr. Smith.
I would like to nominate Mr. David Vickers to serve as board vice president.
I have a motion to nominate Mr. Vickers as vice president.
I'll second.
And I have a second by Mr. Otero. Any discussion? Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero?
Yes.
Mr. Brian Smith?
I vote yes.
I will also vote yes. I will open the floor to have the seat of board secretary fill at this time.
Mr. President.
Go ahead.
I would like to recommend Mr. Frank Otero to serve as in the office of board secretary.
I have a motion to appoint Mr. Frank Otero as board secretary.
I'll second that.
And I have a second by Mr. Frank Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Correction. You said second by Mr. Frank Otero, second by Stephen Otero.
I apologize. It was second by Mr. Frank Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
You said Frank
I'm
Otero
sorry.
again.
I get to see him here on the screen. It has been seconded by Mr. Stephen Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Smith, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero?
Yes.
And I vote yes. At this time, I will be appointing two people to the chair finance committee, and it would give me pleasure to nominate Mr. Frank Otero to chair finance committee. Would you be able to accept that position, Mr. Otero?
Yes, I would. Thank you, sir.
Okay, there's a second person on that committee, and I would like to put Mr. Stephen Otero on that committee. At least I got the Oteros right this time. So I would like to have Mr. Stephen Otero on that finance committee. Would you accept that one, Stephen?
Yes, sir, I will.
So we have one more committee, and that's going to be the audit committee. And I would like to have Mr. Brian Smith chair the audit committee. Would you accept that, Mr. Smith?
I will.
Mr. Vickers, would you also be a member of the audit committee?
Yes, I will.
You have everything there? Okay, so we have completed the board reorganization. So we'll be going to number 10. Approval to untable item presentation and acceptance of independent audit report fiscal year 2020 for Los Lunas Schools. Audrey Jaramillo, JAG, tabled February 23rd at the regular meeting. I will need a motion to untable this.
I will move to untable the item.
I have a motion by board member Vickers to untable the item.
Second.
And I have a second by Mr. Brian Smith. Any discussion? Since we have no discussion, Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Dave Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Brian Smith?
I vote yes.
And I vote yes. Moves us to item number 11, presentation acceptance of independent audit report fiscal year 2020 for Los Cena Schools, Audrey Jaramillo, JAG.
Mr. President, Hiron, thank you for this. I wanted to just take a minute to recognize a few people. We have some people from our audit committee here tonight as we are coming to the independent audit report presentation. First, I wanted to just thank Ms. Claire Sermons. We've got Sandy Trasick. We've got Carlos Castillo, Sonia Simoya, and Mr. Henry Lopez. Thank you all for participating as members of this audit committee. I also have tonight, we have State Auditor Colon here tonight, and I just wanted to give him a moment just to give some introductions. Auditor Colon.
Thank you, Superintendent Dr. Romero. Mr. President, members of the board, it's an honor to be with you this evening. I'm merely here to observe and really thank the board for its focus and its concentration on the report that will be presented and accepted this evening. We realize that in reviewing the audit that is prepared and presented tonight by the Jaramillo Group, Audrey Jaramillo, there are several concerns that I know that you will all take very seriously. You may have some questions this evening, and I look forward to hearing those questions that are going to be presented to Ms. Jaramillo. But I also want to say that the Office of the State Auditor really is about accountability and partnership. And we look forward to working with the administration in remedying some of the issues that are presented in this report. We do take the report very seriously, as I know you do, and we look forward to working with both the administration and the school board on a going forward basis to address any concerns you might have as we find a path forward to make sure that we're delivering as best we can to the important students of the school district. This is obviously personal to me. I'm a graduate of Los Lunas Public Schools and have a longstanding relationship with this community that really, in many, many ways, raised me. So I'm grateful for your leadership, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. President, members of the board, and I'm thankful to my independent public accountant who conducted this audit for my alma mater, the Los Lunas Public School District. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board.
Thank you, Auditor Colon. Thank you for your support of Los Lunas Schools. I'll take this opportunity now to introduce Audrey Jaramillo. She was part of JAG, Jaramillo Accounting Group. She was and her team were able to go through our yearly audit, and she is here tonight to be able to give the final report and presentation to the board. Audrey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and Dr. Romero, Superintendent, also the business officers that are here, thank you, and as well the audit committee members, any members here, thank you for joining tonight. So I am Audrey Jaramillo from JAG, the managing partner and partner on your external audit engagement. Auditor Colon, thank you for joining as well. Good to see you. I love the bookshelves. Libraries are great. So anyway, I just want all of you to feel free to jump in at any time during the course of the presentation. I know Zoom can be a little awkward as far as, you know, knowing when to speak, but just go ahead and interrupt me if there's anything at all that you want me to address or have questions. So with that, Superintendent, should we bring up the financial statements themselves? Is that something that your IT team has available, or I can share my screen? Okay, so first off, everyone can see the PowerPoint here. We have our presentation to the Board of Education. As you know, this is something that is required for us to do after the State Auditor's Office has released the report, and that is to present the report in a public meeting after release, after they put their stamp of approval on it. And so we have the date there from last time, of which of course it was tabled. So next slide. Just to remind everyone of the goals and responsibility of communications, I guess I would boil this down as we want to maintain effective two-way communication between governance and the IPA or audit firm. So we spend a lot of time with management, superintendent, which at the time was the interim superintendent, and also the audit committee. Next. So again, on the purpose of the communication, our auditing standards require us to have those communications, go over the plan, scope, and timing of the audit, which is covered in our engagement letter, and at the end, go over any significant findings from the audit. Next. These are the generally accepted auditing standards that us auditors follow, just the list that we share with you. Next slide. Auditors are responsible for issuing you, what you pay us for is an opinion on these financial statements, that they're presented fairly in all material respects in conformity with general accepted accounting principles. We do not give you absolute assurance. It's reasonable assurance that the financial statements are accurate, just because we have to rely on sampling, and audits would be cost prohibitive if we had to give absolute assurance. So we don't look at 100% of the transactions. Also, we always point out that the audit of the financial statements does not relieve management or those charged with governance of their responsibilities. Next slide. As well, we do take a look at your internal controls. And so anything that we see in internal controls, we communicate any significant matters to you. And in New Mexico, those are all in the audit findings. In other states, sometimes there's the significant matters in the findings, if any, and then a separate management letter that's issued. But in New Mexico, we have them all. Even good accounting practices are to be disclosed in the financial statements. Next. So we have probably quite a few slides here, or I can't see the next one, but this is just to list out the management's responsibilities. Overall, they're responsible for the financial statements, even though we help with the preparation of them, maintaining and establishing internal controls over compliance and the finances, of course. Let us know about any suspected fraud, including allegations, signing the management representation letter, just saying, hey, we've disclosed everything to you that we are aware of, things like that. So management does have a lot of responsibilities during the audit process. Next. So here are the components of your audit, and I think this is just a good visual. The financial statement audit, which is the document, and we'll go over here in a minute, that has all of your numbers for the year ended June 30, 2020. So audits are always looking backwards in time. So this is, essentially old information by now, right? The UGG there stands for Uniform Grant Guidance. That is your federal funds audit. You may have heard it in the past called your single audit. And any entity receiving over $750,000 in federal funds has to have a uniform grant guidance audit. So we have completed that as well. And then of course, OSA and really just state statutes is something that we have to test compliance with, and in accordance with the state audit rule as well. So that third piece there, I look at that as a state compliance audit. Next. So like I said earlier, we take a risk-based approach. We take a look at any areas of concern that management brings up to us. We test your controls and compliance and everything related to what goes into the financial statements. Next slide. So again, we're just taking a look at risks, controls, the governmental, the accounting standards, board standards that may change from year to year. With COVID, any new implementations were put off. So last year, there were not new implementations. And we take all of that and then determine our audit approach and our sampling. And of course, external audits are not designed to detect fraud. And concerns of fraud are usually reserved for special audits. Next slide. The timing of the audit, just so you guys know, we signed the contract in May. We did planning in the new year, the new fiscal year, testing and reporting in November. Next slide. JAG is independent of Los Lunas Public Schools, so we are not aware of any conflicts of interest or relationships that would impair our independence. Next slide. These are our audit opinions, and you'll see these in the financial statements when we go through them, but here's the summary here. Our independent auditor's opinion has an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the best opinion that you can receive, so great work on that. We also have a report on each major program, the federal programs that we audited. And again, that one is an audit opinion of clean or unmodified and the highest level of assurance. Lastly, we have a report on the internal controls and compliance. And that's not an opinion, but it's just a report that refers you to any findings. Next slide. So for the findings, we had 2 resolved in the prior year and 1 repeat. So for the current year findings, we had potential violations of New Mexico state compliance, which is Open Meetings Act, IPRA, Governmental Conduct Act, and procurement. And our note here, which I mentioned last time, that as of the date of the audit, much of this was still under investigation by oversight and law enforcement agencies. We did recommend a special audit, but there were no absolute conclusions at that time, okay? So since there were no conclusions, we're still required to report the potential violations, and you'll see that in the findings. There's also a finding on the audit committee with some recommendations there. The school lunch program, as far as allowable costs and federal funds. The special education cluster, just checking for vendors to be suspended or debarred ahead of time. And Title I, some federal payroll disbursements. We have an observation and recommendation there. The next slide. Okay, so this is post-audit communication upon the completion of the audit. And just wanted, to let you guys know that everything was pretty consistent with the prior year. You're very aligned, as with other school districts in all of your accounting practices. No significant difficulties encountered during the audit. The team did an excellent job with us, provided us everything that we needed. Thank you, Claire and Sandy and everyone for all of your hard work throughout the audit process. No difficulties there. No uncorrected misstatements or disagreements. Management didn't have to go to any other accountants. And again, just to reaffirm our independence, that we are independent. And next slide. Okay, so at this point, I'll stop and just pause for any questions, but I'm sure you guys do want to step into the financial statements themselves as well. So maybe while you're pulling that up, the actual PDF of the financial statements, I will stand for any questions at this point.
So Ms. Jaramillo, is this where you would discuss the findings, or are you going to get to that point in a little bit?
We can get to that. This PowerPoint was really a high level, required communications. But I can, inside of the PDF, go over a few of the schedules with you and then down to the findings.
Sure, I'll wait for that. Thank you.
Okay, sure. You guys have the PDF, or do you want me to screen share?
Ms. Jaramillo, we're pulling it up right now. Just give us 1 second.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Audrey will have it in just a second. Sorry about the wait.
Sure, no problem. In the meantime, I guess I'll mention that audit time is almost here again. So before you know it, Auditor Cologne will be issuing the 2021 state audit rule. Usually happens right after legislative session, right, Auditor? And so at that point in time is when everyone gets their contracts going for the next fiscal year. And we start interim testing pretty much in April, May timeframe. So it's with school districts, it's either audit or budget, right?
That's exactly
it's
right.
one or the other.
Mr. President, if I may. Mr. President.
I'm not. Oh, he's on mute.
Mr. President, President Hidon.
Auditor Cologne, we're just having a little technical difficulties coming off of a mute. If it's okay, Mr. President, I can pass that along.
Mr. Cologne, go ahead.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero, Mr. Superintendent. I just wanted to say two quick things in a follow-up. As we have, during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, as you know, our office oversees the audits and agreed upon procedures of over 800 governmental entities, many of which ran severely late with their audits, and many were extremely challenged with working with their independent public accountants. And I just wanted to give a quick debt of gratitude or express gratitude to the Jaramillo group for their focus on this particular audit, and also to Claire and her team who was completely compliant, responsive, and even in spite of the difficulties presented by remote access and things of that nature, having visited with Auditor Jaramillo, I happen to know that that team was extremely cooperative, collaborative, and we appreciate that very, very much. I don't get to share those sentiments with every entity that I come to visit with on occasion regarding release of audit. But in this particular occasion, I'm very pleased to say that. And Mr. President, members of the board, I'm sure you would want to know that. So I want to take just a minute to say that. Thank you for the liberty of being able to make that comment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Cologne. It appears that we have the PowerPoint set up now.
Okay, so yes, I'll just echo what Auditor Cologne said. Like I said earlier, the team was great, and even with the transition to remote auditing, they did a fantastic job. And even sometimes having a new audit firm, the transition can be different, but it went fine. Our teams worked very well together. So why don't we scroll down here to the table of contents, and I'm just going to walk you guys quickly through this. This is our first year presenting to you, so I just want to, I'm not sure how in depth your previous auditor has presented to you, but so each financial statement for the governments are typically the same. We have the official roster that was above. We have the auditor's report, which I mentioned before was an unmodified or clean opinion. You have the MD&A, what we call the MD&A, the Management Discussion and Analysis, which has a lot of great information for the public to read through, and even has a comparison of the district-wide, last year's numbers to this year's numbers. And sometimes there may even be 3 years in this one, where you can really get a sense of the district and how it's doing from one year to the next. Then we have what's called the government-wide financial statements, and you'll see in the front here a statement of net position, which essentially from a regular business standpoint, this is called the balance sheet, and this is your assets, liabilities, and net assets. And then statement of activities on government-wide, meaning district-wide, that is your income statement. Then the statements jump into what are called the fund financial statements. There's major fund financial statements in the front and then minor funds in the back. And so that's why this report is so long, because school districts have so many funds and so much accountability to PED, and just the way the governing government accounting standards are set up, that everything has to be tracked separately and in its own fund. There's some reconciliations in here and of course, budget to actual schedules as well. So if you're ever curious, I know board members, you approve bars during the year, right? So this is where these kind of show up at the end of the year, where you have your original budget that was approved, then your bars, and then your final budget, and then how the district did on your budget to actual schedules. So we're not going to go into all this detail, but I just want you to be aware it's there and for your reference. The district does have agency funds as well, which is typically sometimes the activity funds at the campuses, and then notes to the financial statements. The notes tell a lot more detail about the numbers that are in the schedules themselves. And so, for example, cash, you're going to have a footnote that explains all about the policies on cash and the detail on cash. And it does that with pretty much every major section of your financial statements. Then we have SI, which is supplementary information. The required pieces are on the net pension liability, the ERB, and the RHCA. And you all know and have heard probably for many years now that there's a huge unfunded balances in these plans that the state just has not yet funded. And so these are schedules where those liabilities get pushed down onto your financial statements. And this just gives all the details about that. The supplementary information is the non-major funds, the smaller funds in the back that I told you about earlier. And of course, again, balance sheet and income statement. You can scroll down. Let's go down a little more here. Other supplementary information, these are schedules that are required by the state audit rule. So we have changes in fiduciary assets and liabilities for agency funds, which, like I said, is typically your activity funds. So if you guys wanted to go look up a campus or a certain activity, you could go to that schedule and say, what's the balance in this activity fund? Pledge collateral, cash schedule, and then a cash reconciliation that's required by PED. Next is the compliance section. You know, our report on internal controls that I mentioned earlier, not an opinion, but a report. Next is the report on compliance for each major federal program, unmodified opinion. Once again, your schedule of expenditures of federal awards will show you all your federal dollars that came into the district. So if you're curious of your total federal awards, it's all there in that schedule. Summary schedule prior audit findings. I gave you the summary on that already. I think it was 2 resolved and 1 repeated. That's there. A schedule of findings and question costs, which I'm sure everybody wants to just jump right to that. Then we have minor findings, which are we call them the 1265 findings, and information on the exit conference. So that is the setup of the financials. And like I said, I'm not going to go through all the details because we would be here all night. And I know you guys had asked to table this because you wanted time to go through it. So if you all don't have a specific request for me, Mr. President, members of the board, audit committee, I will be happy just to jump down and address any questions you have related to findings.
Mr. You're muted.
Looking up. Members of the board, do you have any questions for Mrs. Jaramillo at this time?
Mr. President?
Go ahead.
I actually do have a couple of questions. Move this so I can be understood. So, Ms. Jaramillo, in terms of this document, and would it be safe to say that this is a document that outlines the fiscal well-being of our district, I guess? Something similar to that?
Right, it's the results for your fiscal year ended June 30, 2020.
Okay, so as it pertains to this document, what is the definition of a finding? And I'm asking these questions, and I'm going to be asking a lot of them since I'm going to be moving over to the audit committee. What is the definition of a finding as it pertains to this document?
So findings, as defined by the state audit rule, are essentially any observations or recommendations, even if it's a good accounting practice, that we come across during the course of our audit that we have to gather up and put together into the findings. So if we see any deficiencies, non-compliance, even potential non-compliance, like we have some, we are required to report those in the findings. And there are many categories, just to add to that, there are many categories of findings as well. There's material weaknesses, which the district does not have any material weaknesses. So that is very, very good. And then levels below that. Okay,
so again, bear with me because I've been on the board and I haven't quite seen an audit like this. So I'm specifically speaking about the findings, the potential violations that are outlined on page 124. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm referencing these as bullets because to me, that's what they are. So if that's fair to say, who determines what warrants a bullet in this, on this particular page? If you're following what my question is. Because I want to get to a couple of specific ones, but I'm just wondering, how does this bullet get here? What's the criteria for this bullet being added into this document? Is it, I guess my question is it, can somebody call in and say, hey, I think there was a violation of some sort and that warrants a bullet? Do we have to have an email? Who can provide information to get a bullet in here? Does it have to be a school board member claiming something against a staff member against a school board member, community ex-employee against a board member and or staff? I guess overall, how does a bullet get here? And what criteria is used to actually put one of these bullets in here?
That's a very good question. So what is bulleted within the finding is usually brought to our attention during the course of our audit testing and our audit inquiries. People, as well, as I mentioned before, we encourage two-way communication. So that is something we always ask for and encourage people to communicate with us about any concerns that they may have.
So, and I apologize, I have a few questions and then I'll be done. Why are there no names on here? Why does it say board members instead of Brian Smith?
That is a great question as well. That is industry practice for us auditors here in New Mexico. And I can't say that that's 100% across the board, especially when it comes to forensic audits. There are some forensic auditors who will actually name names. That is not industry practice here in New Mexico. We put, normally we put positions, but we don't call people out by name in a public document like that. And that's just always the way it's been through the state auditor's office, through many administrations going back to the beginning of my career. So.
Thank you, Ms. Jaramillo. So I am going to call myself out here in a second. But so this document is dated June 30th, 2020. Was there any information at all added to this document after that date?
Yes, as I said, everything is looking to the past. So your financial information was June 30, 2020 for that fiscal year ended, but not everything is ready for us to audit until the fall. And so information is gathered from the time of our contract in the spring, summer, all the way until, the November deadline.
So are we finished collecting data on these bullets on page 124?
No, and that's exactly why I put in there very clearly that these things were pending, because I could not give conclusions when there's oversight agencies still gathering information and not having released their reports. Okay, so that I was very careful, because knowing that there's other information and other agencies looking at things, I was not going to give final conclusions on that.
Okay. Okay. So I see what your point is. I'm going to help you out here a little bit. So on one of these bullets, and I'm going to address a couple of them, and I'm going to put my name on it because I believe you're talking about me. On one of the bullets, it says that the board may have violated the Open Meetings Act. And the reason I'm doing this is because this was thrown out to the public and they got to judge us without any input, in my opinion, from myself. I won't speak for anybody else, but from myself. So speaking specifically to this bullet, it says the board may have violated the Open Meetings Act by going into closed executive sessions illegally during the spring of 2020. So in referencing some of the documents I have, and the reason I'm bringing this up is this has already been addressed at least twice. Again, I'm calling myself out. I have a recall petition here for me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the malfeasance notification bullets was violation of the state law, Open Meetings Act, on 3/24/20, 4/16/20, 4/21/20, and 5/6 of 20. And to me, that means spring of 2020. So during this hearing, the district judge states that the recall petition contains no more than general and conclusory allegations insufficient under New Mexico state statute for a recall action. In addition, the petitioner was unprepared to present evidence at the evidentiary hearing as required by the act. So that's one time that the Open Meetings Act, apparently closed executive sessions were illegally done during the spring of 2020. Another one that references that is a letter dated November 18th, 2020 from the Attorney General's office, where these allegations were also submitted for the March 16th, April 6th, April 16th, April 21st, and May 26th, 2020, that we went into closed executive session. So to me, that's also the spring of 2020. So in the Attorney General's report, it states, and I won't read the whole report because it's a few pages long, but I will tell you this. I did read everything that they said in this report. Notwithstanding the board's incorrect interpretation of section 1015-1H7, its closed session discussion at the March 16th meeting would have been authorized by OMA's limited personnel matters exception, since that exception applies to the discussion of, and I can go on and read the whole thing, but it comes out pretty long. So that was one of the things that said that we basically had one of the wordings right, but we still could have had the closed executive session. So that's the second one that deals with this Open Meetings Act violation that's in this here and actually has a bullet on it. It further states in the Attorney General's report that we were reported as having public comment at a May 6, 2020 meeting. They basically said, and I'll read it, we have found no merit in the remaining allegation which posits that the board violated OMA by permitting public comment on an agenda at its meeting at May 6, 2020. In conclusion, although we have largely concluded that the OMA allegations raised by these complaints lack merit, we strongly advise the board to revise its approach to the state's pending or threatened litigation exemption, which I did. I actually read it and they were 100% correct. So in my opinion, that bullet has been addressed 2 times, and now we're addressing it for a 3rd time. And what I found out is we're going to be addressing it for a 4th time. So I can forward these to you if you need them, because you say you're still in the data collecting portion of this. The second one I want to talk about is the bullet that's right above it. And this one here is really bothersome to me, where it states that 2 board members received legal services for the defense of a recall proceeding brought by a community member. If there are questions as to who paid for these services, if there was a contract, and if the district would ultimately charged or not. There is an allegation of quid pro quo, and I will say this, it's a 4th degree felony. So when somebody accuses me of a 4th degree felony, I am going to defend myself. The board members took actions utilizing the attorney services for the district in exchange for the defense they received. They also are concerns about conflict of interest and representation of individual board members and the entire board simultaneously. So basically what this says is we charged the district somehow, apparently, for this, or we got information provided to us free of charge for the attorney representing, and I'll speak for myself, in a failed recall attempt. So I want to read a letter from the Attorney General dated July 18th of 2007. It's a question that says, is it appropriate to use public funding to defend public school districts, boards, and employees in legal actions involving misconduct? Conclusion, as a legal matter, providing a defense for school districts, officials, and employees in lawsuits alleging misconduct is a legitimate use of public funds subject to certain limitations. And I will read those limitations at the end of this document. It says, the charges must arise from the discharge of an official duty in which the government has an interest. That is true. The public employee must have been acting in good faith when the alleged wrongful conduct occurred. That is true. The employing government entity must have express or implied legal authority to pay the employee's legal expenses. We all do. The employee must be exonerated of the charges. That is true. The decision to pay the fees must be made by an impartial official or official body. That has not been done yet. And I will tell you why that hasn't been done yet, because Brian Smith has not submitted an invoice to the district. I have an invoice here from my attorney that represented me in the failed recall attempt, addressed to me at my home address with the bill addressed to me. I'm responsible for this bill. And there's 2 people on the face of the earth that knows the financial arrangements that were made between myself and my legal representation in the failed recall attempt. And before this bullet got put in this document, nobody called me. Nobody called him. There's only 2 people that know how that was set up, but nobody called us, yet we put it in here that we think you did that. So you can understand my questions as to how these bullets get put into these documents. To me, it's putting the cart before the horse. Did I get criticized for these? I absolutely did. So it's my duty, I think, to defend myself and say, look, I have this that says I didn't do anything wrong. I have this that says I did. I have all of this that says we did not violate the Open Meetings Act. I have this from any agency that says we did. So that's my point in bringing up these bullets. It just seems like, I don't know. That's why I asked you, have you finished collecting information for that? So if I can help you with information on at least those 2 bullets, I would be more than happy to do it. I can't speak for the rest of the bullets because I literally can't put my name on it. But I just wanted to bring up, since it was put out there, especially this quid pro quo one. And in my opinion, the accuser or accusers, 1, knew that this was not true. 2, didn't have any evidence whatsoever. And 3, did it maliciously to slander my name. Those 3 things, in fact, in my opinion, did in fact take place. And I'm still trying to find out, and I've been told that we are not permitted to know who submitted these bullets. So I'm still trying to find out if that's true. I'm assuming it is. I don't know, but I'm still working to find out through various channels how we get that information, because not to create a huge deal out of this, but to say, look, here it is. So stop accusing us of this, especially the Open Meetings Act for the board. Stop accusing us of it. It's already been ruled on 2 times by very prominent entities. So I have a couple of more things highlighted, but I'm just going to yield the floor because I can talk for a while. But I thank you, Ms. Jaramillo, for listening to me, and I thank you for answering my questions. I think you were very honest and forthcoming in your responses, and I appreciate you providing me that information. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm going to go ahead and go to some other board members. If you do need to come back, Mr. Smith, I will give you some more time to this. Board members, do you have any more questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Stephen Otero?
I too am going to say that I am in these bullets as well. But I do want to address a few things here. So the first thing, it says the Board of Education procured vendors to perform legal counsel and forensic audit, special audit procedures during the closed session in violation of the Open Meetings Act and without the CPO's normal procurement process and clarification in violation of the district policy and the state procurement code. That's a little troubling to me because all our communication has been under legal counsel advice as well as communicating with the superintendent. We cannot communicate as a board member with any other employee other than the superintendent. So if our superintendent at the time did not communicate in reference to following the procurement code with the CPO, I don't know how that can be laid to blame on the Board of Education. The second one, it says a forensic audit higher quote of 16,000 up to 36,000 was chosen. I'll stop right there. And Ms. Jaramillo, I've known you because I used to work for you at the Moriarty Edgewood School District. And here again, you're doing your job. We understand that. But wouldn't it have been proper to disclose that it was your accounting or your organization that was first contacted to do this forensic audit? I'm just asking, wouldn't that have been a good document to provide on this same audit to disclose that you were there? The next thing is, you know, the price was later changed to $25,000. Audit engagement and paid $45,000. The legal service did not go through the procurement, and the contract with scope of work has totaled $52,221 over the district's policy to go out to bid for professional services over $40,000. Here again, based on legal counsel and our communication as the only employee that works for us, the superintendent, in my understanding, the superintendent should have, at the time, did the proper procurement to do this. We didn't do it. We didn't say, yes, we're going to do this, and yes, we're going to do that. It was asked, and we approved it. I don't know this one. One board member, education member, may have not disclosed the company he owns and his brother's company, for which he is the main contact to prevent conflict of interest. That could be me. I don't know. It could be maybe other board members, because I don't know whose brother owns companies. My brother does, and I have a company. What to be disclosed, I don't understand that. So that's kind of vague on my part. The next one is one Board of Education member disclosed confidential information during a finance committee meeting with a community vendor, which required the CPO to void or cancel the entire procurement for carpet cleaning. The vendor and the vendor's price were identified before the award, thus was canceled. The State Ethics Commission issued an advisory opinion 2020-04 on this activity. There again, I don't know who gave you this information, but it's my understanding that at the board meeting, it was chosen by the superintendent to remove that from board approval for the carpet cleaning. And it was the CPO's opinion, my understanding, that we I guess, identified the vendor, which during the meeting, I don't want to get into that either. It was identified by our acting superintendent, Walter Gibson, the exact quote and who the vendor was. Let me see. One Board of Education member is accused of using his newly elected position to drive a forensic audit against the department he was not hired for a year earlier. This is a pending investigation into extortion and interference with a special audit. I don't know who's extorting. I don't even know what the word means. I had to look it up. But I hope it's not me that they're saying that's providing this extortion. The one thing that I do have to say is that, becoming a board member, and if you worked for the school district, it's kind of odd that if you cannot question a department that you work for. One in question would be, that I know of, in Belen Schools, Miss Pino, who was a PE teacher. I retired as a PE teacher, and she became a board member. Would she be abusing her right as a board member because she questioned something in athletics? That's, to me, is troubling too. So with that said, I want to bring up a presentation that I've had for quite some time to justify what I felt, which was my actions that I discussed with the superintendent on what I would call unethical, immoral purchases. And at this time, I'd like to ask our tech people to put something up into the computer, and I'll identify as we move on. So right here we have I guess you want to call it a barn building that was erected at Valencia High School and Los Unos High School. To erect this barn, a purchase was made, and this I asked from our superintendent Sanders back when we started, because it was brought to my attention that there was some purchases done that weren't even part of the deal. So to build this barn, if you can go to the next slide, see if I can get that one. This barn takes 6 roof trusses at a cost of $600 a piece. Why this didn't come out on our forensic audit, I don't know. But yet our district purchased 7 for each barn, but yet no truss is anywhere to be found. That's $1,200 right there. If we can go to the next picture. That's a barn that shows the 6 trusses that I'm talking about that are currently used at this point in time. And this is just a question that I had of expenditures that, in my thought, and I shared this with the board early on in, I think it was like in March, in a work session we had. And I shared it with Superintendent Sanders and Acting Superintendent Gibson. And I've also shared it with Dr. Romero as he came in. So if we can go to the next slide, please. These are things that were purchased by our district. This is the backpack, black 18, means it carries 18 cold drinks, soft drink. To me, this is unethical purchases. If we can go to the next slide. This is to do body work in our district. And this was purchased not by the transportation department, but by another department. And they're tools that I don't think our district does any body work. So these are just things that came up during what I looked at in expenditures and people that were bringing to my attention. We can go to the next slide. These were purchased, and I think it's a great tool, and I think each maintenance man should have one. Although this purchase was done from one vendor, while at the same time, within the same month or two, several others were purchased from another vendor. We can go to the next slide. This is really troubling to me, to purchase a Leatherman bracelet. If this item here, this item was really troubling because at a cost of $182, of course it's a little screwdriver and Allen key set and everything else. But to me, this brings to question, how about our, would it be ethical for our finance department or personnel department to buy an ink pen that's going to cost $300? To me, it's the same issue there. So these were purchases that are approved by our district, and at a cost of $180 for this one, and only one was purchased. If we can go to the next one. This is Dawn soap, and I thought this was kind of odd because this was also purchased by a different department other than our warehouse department that provides dishwashing soap to all our school district, and this was just a special purchase. And for some reason, maybe it was used. I don't know. They could use it in the fields or whatever the case might be. But that's minor. I understand that. But $121 for this container of soap is quite expensive. If we can go to the next one, please. Sunscreen. I applaud whoever purchased this, but you have to have containers for it to apply it. And but a gallon at a cost of $228 for sunscreen. You know, when our warehouse there, again, the custodial supplies or even our nurses could probably purchase this. We can go to the next screen. Another backpack, another 18 backpack. This is all, and all these purchases were done from one vendor within 1 year. And they say that there was no warranted investigation. I think there is. So this was another backpack that was purchased by our department. If we can go to the next one. Binocular harnesses, along with 2 binoculars that were purchased. I don't know why we need 2 binoculars and why we need 2 harnesses. I'm sure they can justify saying I've got to look at the cameras, I got to look at something. But you know, we're going high end with some of this stuff that I think is a misuse of our funds. Next one, please. A gun case. I don't know why we need a gun case, protective gun case. And this was another item that just 1 gun case was purchased. I don't know what it was for. We can go to the next one. This is very interesting. Survival hatchet, a backpack hatchet at a cost of $200. Here again, I think this is our purchases that are really unwarranted and unethical. Next one, please. Now, this was another very interesting one. This is almost a $1,200 item. It was a vacuum pack machine that wasn't even purchased by our cafeteria services. It was purchased by another department, which later on in the report they stated that it was used for events for our district. Well, I don't know if we're in the business of packing food and saving it. We can go to the next one. Another item that was bought by another department, not our cafeteria services, but I understand the cafeteria has it now, is a blender at $468. Another one, please. 2 daggers, hunting daggers. I don't know how we could use those, but those were purchased. You know, here again, $29. People might look at it petty, small, but my father used to say it's the big money you got to take care of, not the little money. I mean, it's the little money you got to take care of, not the big money. The big money takes care of itself. We can go to the next one. We had 3 knives like this purchased. This at the same time as we're buying Leathermans and hunting daggers. And to me, it's, here again, unethical, and I don't think it's proper that our district is having to put out some money for this type of stuff. We'll go to the next one. That's the last one. How about there? Yeah, so the question was asked, why did we do an audit and why did we spend so much money? I regret the money we spent. I do. I regret that the amount that it took to spend it, and I felt that personally responsible for it, but the audit was done. There was stuff that's going to change now, and it's already changed. Purchasing large amount of tools and large amount of items on an open purchase order of $7,500. I think we've cut that back. I don't think we're doing that. So there has been some good that has come from this audit, but you know, it's tough that we as board members can't, and they say we're in charge of our finances, our assets. To me, I felt that I was not doing anything wrong in approaching this. So that, you know, this, you know, this, and I'm glad Mr. Cologne's in this meeting, because, you know, $600 here, $600 there, and this is only 1 year's time. And to me, it's a waste of funding. I'm going to move on to the same one that Mr. Brian Smith was on the recall. You know, yeah, it's troublesome that we have to defend ourselves for actions that we take that people don't like, but that's what came out of it, and mine was dismissed. Yes, I do have an invoice as well. You know, it's troubling, and this audit report is very troubling to me, because I too think that if there's going to be accusations for board members, I mean, we know it's not Mr. Vickers, we know it's not Frank Otero. I don't know who else it is, but you know, I know that it's me on the part that they said retaliating against the department that I was not hired by, and that was published in the papers last week. And it was Steve Otero based on previous publications. To say that somebody's retaliating for checking into the finances and for the expenditures that are unethical, I think that's totally uncalled for. So this report is troubling to me as well. I know you're doing your job, Ms. Jaramillo, and it's a very nice report. But here again, it's personally attacking board members. And at the end, well, not the end, but when you go down to the page 126, until the investigations are complete, it is unknown the exact causes. However, examples could be lack of training or circumvention of controls over compliance by individuals. I mean, like Mr. Smith said, a lot of that stuff has been unwarranted, but yet it's still brought up again. I'm wanting to know if it's on file. Did you pull it as a file? And here again, you did say that it was brought to your attention by by staff members, I guess. So yeah, it's troubling. It's troubling that we as board members have to defend ourselves when we think we're doing the right thing. And you know, I know I called Mr. Colon months ago, and I regret not following through with it. But under the advice of our legal counsel, they said that we need to get a separate auditor that was spearheaded by Superintendent Dana Sanders. At this point, I would like to reserve time if I have to answer some more questions or make some more comments, Mr. President. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Ms. Jaramillo.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen Otero. Board members?
I just have a couple more, if I may, to clarify some of the comments that Mr. Stephen Otero made in reference to the first one, that the Board of Education procured vendors to perform legal services. I don't want to read the whole thing. It's talking about the price and the $45,000, and tie that in to the third or fourth one from the bottom that says one Board of Education member is accused of using his newly elected position to drive a forensic audit against the department he was not hired for a year earlier. Now, I can tell you that I can't put my name on here. However, what I can do is read an email that I have. I don't have the exact date, but I can tell you this is from our previous superintendent. I won't read the entire email, but we'll get down to the part where it says, as you know, having someone come in to do an independent audit was part of my answer to Mr. Stephen Otero's concerns regarding the Las Lunas School District. This was from our previous superintendent. My first page took a hike. I don't know where that went. The second one that I want to tie into this, speaking of the forensic audit, was, yes, it did cost a lot of money, and I want the public to know it did cost a lot of money. And yes, I feel bad that it cost that much money. I do. However, I want to read to you an email that I got from our interim superintendent on July 8th. Addressed to me. One ticklish issue about the REDW bill. The PO that we cut, which aligns with the REDW estimate of $16,000 to $36,000, was not to exceed $36,000. The current bill totals $38,826. I'm reading this so we can be transparent. And then there is still work to be done on the final report and its presentation to the board and eventually to the state auditor's office. Do you want us to do an addendum to the contract to cover the not to exceed amount for this bill, or do you want to bring it to the board for approval? Eventually, I expect that these expenses will likely exceed our threshold of $40,000, which is a board policy, not the $60,000, which is a state policy, for a Las Lunas Schools purchase order lacking a bid process. Now, what I did not find is my response to him, but obviously I responded to him somehow because I'm looking at the agenda from the meeting that was held directly after this email, dated August 18th, 2020. And item number 9 states, a tabled item from July 21st, 2020 regular meeting, Finance Committee item, approval of purchase REDW LLC for purchase order increase out of operational. Approval to untable the item, consideration of approval of purchase. That was on our agenda. After our agenda, if you consider what was posted in the minutes for item number 9, it states, Mr. Gibson reported that the original purchase letter was for up to $36,000. After reviewing it, the REDW, they said it would take another $19,000 to complete, and that would have brought the cost to $55,000. After the last meeting, He told REDW representatives that he thought that would be completely unacceptable to the board, which I agreed with, and that we needed to get a number that was much closer to the original amount they had discussed. He and REDW had agreed that 45,000 was the middle point, and he had agreed that he would recommend that to the board. Mr. Gibson said that he did not know that the forensic investigation took more man hours than was anticipated in the beginning. He added that as the board knew, he did not have any control over the investigation. Mr. Gibson said that he did communicate regularly with the two representatives from REDW. He thought that the amount, the additional $9,000, represented the work that they did. He knew that that report was submitted to the board already. The report is now in the hands of the state auditor as required by statute. The job was completed, and he would recommend that the board approve the additional $9,000. There being no further discussion, Mr. Smith called for a motion. The motion passed 4 votes to 1. One of the board members voted no. I'm not going to say which board member voted no, but it passed 4 to 1. So on Mr. Gibson's recommendation, the board approved the additional $9,000. So if you read it just for what it reads in this thing, it does look like a board member just went crazy with a forensic audit. And I have an email from our previous superintendent saying this was her idea, which it was. And we did actually go through the proper process, at least from July 8th on, where the acting superintendent sent this email. We put it on the board agenda. We voted on it. It's in our minutes, and it got approved by the board. So just to tack that on to the comments that you have made about those 2 particular items, I promise you, I don't want to talk about any more items. I yield the floor till the discussion is over.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other board members?
Mr. President,
Mr. Vickers?
I would be interested to hear a response by Ms. Jaramillo and perhaps by Auditor Colon regarding what's been discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I have a couple of questions. It's disturbing seeing some of those pictures and trying to figure out how some of those items purchased would help students in the classrooms. Real disturbing. Ms. Jaramillo, you said that people brought these bullets to your attention. Was there ever a conflict of interest list provided to you that anybody was supposed to sign?
Yeah.
Thank you. And any of the information brought to your attention during the after the REDW report, was it disclosed to you that some of the employees that participated in the REDW investigation were called in and interrogated? Some of the people that were involved in the investigation, was that disclosed to you?
Honestly, I would have to go back into my records and check, but it was my understanding that REDW during the process of the special audit was performing interviews.
I'm talking about after the REDW was submitted, people in our central office called in some of the employees that participated in the investigation. Were you aware of that? Was that disclosed to you?
Honestly, I'd have to go back and check the records. I can't give you 100%, but I'm not aware of what those conversations exactly yielded, if it was there.
Okay, thank you.
One final thing, Mr. President. Ms. Jaramillo, I know that you did a terrific job on this. Trust me, I don't mean to take out my frustrations on you at all. I appreciate this document. It is extremely thorough. And I know that you did not put these in there yourself. I think you did a terrific job on here. It's very, very thorough. It makes sense to me. Even the findings that are referencing me make sense to me. And had somebody told me that, I probably would have put it in here as well. So I want to make it perfectly clear that I am 100% confident that you did exactly what you were supposed to do with this report. And I appreciate your effort because it obviously took you a long time. And I definitely need you to understand that I appreciate your work and I don't hold you responsible for anything that's in here other than the facts. So thank you so much for your work. I appreciate it.
Board members, any more questions? So
President,
go ahead, Mr. Vickers.
I had made a request and it hasn't been addressed.
Can you repeat your request again? So
I would like to hear a response from Ms. Jaramillo regarding what was discussed, and also from Brian Colon if he would like to comment on that also.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Ms. Jaramillo, Mr. Colon.
Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Vickers, members of the board as well. I would just like to really thank you for your comments. First of all, Mr. Smith, I appreciate what you've said here at the last, and really do appreciate your questions. I know this from both sides of, auditing and as well being a member of governance. And I completely understand that you're in a position this evening of needing to report to the community and give information, clear up any misunderstandings that you think are there that the community needs to know. So I do appreciate that. I do want to say that the timing here, people just need to kind of take into consideration the timing from our perspective, because many of these things had not been resolved, and I still don't know resolution yet until we get into the next audit cycle. Okay, but just to take one as an example would be the Open Meetings Act violations. The AG's office had not yet issued their opinion on if it had truly been a violation or not. So at this next audit, that gives me the opportunity to say, okay, we weren't going to go up against anything they were doing, right? They were in the middle of that. But now for this year, we know possibly once I look at everything that issue had been resolved possibly, right? So that's what it sounds like to me, is a lot of timing. I had not seen, Mr. Otero, Stephen, those pictures. And, I just want to encourage all of you as board members, your fiscal responsibilities are very serious, and it is a good thing to ask questions and pursue those answers. And, I have been asked several times about special audits, and I'm always an advocate of them, because that's how you get answers. That's how you flesh out what's right, what's wrong, what's truth, what's not. And I think that as of the time of this audit, there was still just a lot of that being brought up to law enforcement. I'm not even sure their status as of this time. And then, like I said, the oversight agencies as well. So it's really, I think, an issue of timing, and a lot of it should resolve itself after these agencies take a look at everything.
I agree with you 100%. It is definitely an issue of timing. That's why I asked you about the date of this. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but you're right. We will do that. And now that I'm on the audit committee, I look forward to working with you. I do, because I really believe that this is definitely a process that we need to go through as a district, and I look forward to it. I really do. And like I said, I appreciate your hard work, but I agree with you 100%. It's a matter of timing, because you're right. The information I presented came after this date. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you also to the audit committee, Mr. Vickers, Mr. Frank Otero. They were great to work with us as well. We talked through these issues with them as well, and offered the opportunity to have a closed session with the entire board. But at the time, it was a determination was made, let's do the exit conference, submit the report, let everybody know this is pending further, information, and get the report submitted on time. as well, like I said, I had recommended a special audit, but nobody wants another special audit, right? So it's
That's
not
right.
really the external auditor's job to go into that deep of a dive on certain things and start doing a forensic audit in the middle of the external audit. So those were things that we communicated to the audit committee and to the state auditor's office as well. Mr. Vickers, did I address your concerns?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jaramillo. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond and your thoughts on everything that was said.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ms. Jaramillo. Mr. Vickers also asked Mr. Colon to engage in this.
Thank you, Mr. President, Board Member Vickers, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. Just a couple of general thoughts, and I'm not going to take a deeper dive into some of the specifics, but a couple of things that I wanted to really underscore in terms of appropriateness and comments that Auditor Jaramillo made in response and during her presentation. One of the things that was very eloquently spoken to by Board Member Smith was essentially the lack of specific naming of individuals in an audit report. That is based on auditing standards. Auditor Jaramillo alluded to that. She signs off on this audit that she conducted the audit under auditing standards and those general principles that auditors operate under. She also mentioned that you will find forensic audits that do refer to individuals. Those are different standards. You have auditing standards and then you have forensic standards. And you will see that those two do not always run side by side. There are distinctions with a difference. You have pointed out one of the main differences between an audit report and a forensic audit. Two very different things, two very different standards. And I just want to say that Auditor Jaramillo did comply with the standards that are recognized in the auditing community under our audit rule and the standards that we apply at the Office of the State Auditor. I think that was important for me to validate, and I think that's exactly what you said, Auditor Jaramillo, but I do want to affirm that position. I also want to say that you did make clear, Auditor Jaramillo, in this report from the Jaramillo Group, that there are still ongoing investigations by oversight. Those will continue until those oversight agencies complete their investigations. At such time those are completed, they should be released to the public with either no further action or further action contemplated. This board will be made aware of those by way of the administration. The other third important point that I think is very relevant is that when I will say that Auditor Jaramillo is responsible for what's in this report. I know that Board Member Smith indicated he doesn't hold Ms. Jaramillo responsible for what's in this report. In fact, he should. And in fact, those are all fair and appropriate questions. I think Auditor Jaramillo would agree with me. She signs the report. We review the report at the Office of the State Auditor and we release it, provided it's consistent with auditing standards, and we approve and release it at that time, which has occurred. So the questions you ask are on point. They're appropriate for the auditor. And I think Auditor Jaramillo has answered them appropriately as well. She has addressed some of the timing issues. She's addressed the fact that some things are still outstanding. The one thing that I think we need to really take note of, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero, and I know this isn't your first audit. You've served with distinction in other districts, and you have been through this process on numerous occasions. But I want to point out to the public and I will remind members of the board, Mr. President, board members, Dr. Romero, that when an audit finding is identified in a report and placed in a report, that draft report is provided to management. Management of the entity of which is being audited at any given time. It is then management or administration's responsibility to provide clear direction as to what we call, under standards, a response. You see, so the district has an obligation to respond. Now, individual governing members may not agree with or find the responses to be complete, But nevertheless, from an auditing standpoint, that's where the response comes from. And I think it's important, Mr. President, members of the board, that we all understand the technical moving parts that take place for an audit before it is released. The district did provide a response to the findings, and I would encourage everybody to review those. If they're not comfortable with those, then as Auditor Jaramillo indicated, they can be addressed again in the following audit, because any findings that are in this report will be reported back out in 1 year. And I'm not sure everybody's aware of that. Probably members of the public aren't aware. And you have a very robust audience this evening. I think you've got somewhere between 100 and 150 people that are watching this evening, this board meeting. And I would just say that these are all things that are important logistics that take place and that everybody should be aware of. And I would encourage, and the reason I sent you correspondence recently is that it's my sincere hope that the board members stay engaged in this process.
Mr. Cologne,
I'm sorry,
Cologne,
Mr. President.
can I interrupt you? I think we lost one of the board members, and it's only fair that he listens to you also. Can
I
you
would
give us
like
one
that.
second? Sorry about that.
No problem. I'm happy to wait. I apologize for not noticing, Mr. President.
Oh, no, they had to remind me. Don't worry about it. Okay, I think we're back on. Mr. Otero, you're there. Mr. Colon, sorry about that. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and Board Member Otero. I'm not sure where I lost you, but I was just wrapping up. And I think the main thing is that I supported Auditor Jaramillo in her position regarding the standards for audits versus forensic audits and the distinction there. And I was leading into an important comment regarding management response to initial findings by the auditor. And I was just talking about the technical process that takes place behind the scenes that maybe the public wasn't aware of, and maybe, Mr. President, all the members of the board may not have been aware of some of these things. But those initial findings are presented to management, and they are given an opportunity to respond. In this case, the response was provided by administration. As Auditor Jaramillo indicated, these findings that were in this report will be revisited in the next audit. And so if there is additional information, whether it's because of ongoing oversight agencies that are conducting their work, or whether it's additional information that Superintendent Dr. Romero and the team or the board want to provide to the auditor, that is certainly a time for that information to be included. Every finding that is identified is revisited the following year. As you know, you had a finding last year that was not repeated this year. It showed that it was addressed, and essentially what I think about is being put to bed and no longer an issue for the district. So those are some of the things from a technical standpoint that I wanted to point out. Some of the things that were brought up, the individual items. I will say though that, and you know, I usually do not comment on specific items or transactions that are discussed during an audit presentation. And I noticed, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Romero, that the agenda calls for an accepting of this audit, and we may be making more clear in our audit rule this year as it's presented. But really, you receive it, and it's informational, but it's really not anything that's approved or technically accepted by motion of the board. There's no harm, no foul there, but I know that different school districts have that question, and I just wanted to provide some informal clarity on that. And Auditor Jaramillo, I will say that the email that was read, I'm not going to speak to that specifically, but I will say that any vendor that is operating in a manner that the transactions are to avoid compliance with the procurement code, any activity like that is going to be of great concern to me as the state auditor. I didn't read the whole email. I know what I heard. And I just want to generally say that identifying opportunities to avoid the procurement code are never looked upon very well, at least not by the Office of the State Auditor. So I would just issue that as a cautionary comment and not a specific comment, because I don't know context. I haven't seen any documents, and frankly, I didn't see anything. I trust what was read to me was directly off a document, but it's inappropriate for me to comment specifically on that. But generally speaking, I would offer that as a word of caution to this body. Mr. President, members of the board, I do appreciate the latitude for allowing me to join you tonight. And then, Mr. President, Board Member Vickers, thank you for the opportunity to comment, or the request that I comment. And hopefully I've addressed some items that may be something you were thinking about. And I appreciate Auditor Jaramillo's work. You should know that the Jaramillo Group does a substantial amount of work with the Office of the State Auditor, and I find it to almost always to be exemplary and always to be in compliance. So thank you very much, Auditor Jaramillo. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. Colon. Board members, I want to thank you for the engagement in this issue. There's one board member that I want to thank, because Mr. Otero, I know you brought this up in October, probably September, October timeframe, and I asked you to hold off on it till we had a permanent superintendent. And right now we have Mr. Dr. Romero on board. So next year at this time, we'll be doing the same thing and going over this audit, and we're probably going to be going over the corrective actions, but I have total faith in you, Mr. Dr. Romero, that we will be addressing these. And these aren't big issues to address. They're not, I mean, looking over them, I think we can get through this real quick. But I know we can have some corrective actions and we can do what's best for the students in our district. Any other questions, board members? So we have item number 11, presentation and acceptance of independent audit report fiscal year 2020 for Las Unas schools. And I'm going to need a motion to approve this or deny it.
Mr.
Mr.
President, point of order, Mr. President. Mr. President.
So there is no approval. I don't think
We
there's
have to
any
accept it,
approval.
right? Do we, Mr. Romero, do we have to accept this?
Mr. President, based on some of the conversation we've had here tonight, I believe it does not need to be accepted. This is for informational purposes. So no, it does not need to be accepted. It does need to be an action item. Does not need to be.
It does not need to be an action item.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. So then that means we go to item number 13E.
State Auditor Cologne, I apologize, Mr. President. Did you have a comment?
I'm sorry, Mr. President, members of the board, if you did put it on the agenda as an acceptance, it certainly wouldn't be inappropriate for you to do that. My point in taking a little bit of liberty of interrupting and asking to be recognized was simply, I think that Mr. President, Mr. Board Member Otero, Frank Otero, that is, was moving in the direction of approving. And that was certainly something that I wanted to just caution you not to approve, but to be consistent with the agenda, at the most, it should be accepted as presented by Auditor Jaramillo. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Cologne. So that moves us to item number 13E.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. We do have one item tonight for discussion. This is item 13E. This is the approval of an MOU between Las Unas Schools and Central Regional Educational Cooperative, the grant funding for the Stop It School Violence Act. For this, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Baca. He oversees this grant. Mr. Baca, if you could talk to us a little bit about what this is and how we use it.
Thank you, Dr. Romero. Mr. President, members of the board. You're right. This MOU is actually a grant opportunity through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. The Stop It app has been used for our district for 3 years. It is an anonymous reporting app where students and staff can identify and report any issue that they have as far as with school security or any other matter that needs to be brought to the attention of both the school administration and law enforcement. As we had indicated about 3 years ago, the entities and the partnerships that were described by Chief Gabaldon, including Las Unas Fire Department, Valencia County Sheriff, State Police, Las Unas Fire, and Valencia County Fire, we were looking at a way to give our students and staff an opportunity to take and actively participate in school safety. We figure that safety is not just the responsibility of our school resource officers, security staff, or administration or staff. It's actually everybody's responsibility. So this program was actually brought into the district about 3 years ago. It has been used primarily at our secondary schools, our high schools, and our middle schools. This MOU basically says that as a part of this grant, the cost of the program and the use of the Stop It app will be covered by this grant through September 30th of 2023. So this is because we were actively using this grant, and this is this program. This is just an opportunity that, as part of the grant, the Las Unas schools will no longer be responsible for the payment of it. And also with some new tools in there, we'll actually be expanding it to our elementary schools as well. So this is another opportunity for us to expand the school-wide safety net to all of our school sites and all of our departments. Just a side note that the successful use of this app, the Las Unas PD uses this app, the Stop It app, for its own anonymous tip program. So this has been great. It It is continually monitored by administration, district administration, site administration, and law enforcement. And as Mr. Otero had said earlier, as we ramp up and we prepare to get our students back on campus, we are launching and working to get all of these safety measures in place to ensure a smooth and safe transition into in-person learning.
Thank you, Mr. Baca. We stand for any questions.
Board members?
I don't have a question. I'm the one that asked that it be read, and I think that this should be continued practice in our board meetings, that any MOUs that we have, or JPAs, anything like that, that should be out in the open. So our district, and that was very informative of Mr. Baca, and it kind of opens it up for kind of an appreciation for what's going on. So I just think it should be common practice that all MOUs be read at the board meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. Any other board members? Since there's nothing, we'll move to item number 14, announcement of meetings.
Mr. President, we need to approve that item.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So item number 13E, I'm going to need to approve that item. So I will need a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve item number 13E.
Mr. Stephen Otero's made a motion to approve item 13E.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Stephen Otero.
Yes.
Brian Smith?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Now that moves us to item number 14, announcement of meetings. Location dependent on CDC mandates. If needed, the meetings will be held via Zoom. April 8th through the 10th will be an NSBA 2021 online experience conference held virtually. April 13th, 2021, there'll be a regular board meeting in the central office boardroom at 6 o'clock. April 14th, New Mexico School Board Association Region 4 spring meeting will be held virtually 5:30 to 8:30. April 20th, 21, Finance Committee meeting in the central office conference room at 4 o'clock. April 27th, 2021, regular board meeting and central office board meeting at 6 o'clock. This brings us to the announcement. These are the ones that were announced, right? Was there any other ones? I was supposed to read that before the night. Okay, I was supposed to read this before all the dates are there. So this brings us to the announcement of meetings as allowed by the Open Meetings Act. On the occasion, a quorum of board members attend the same function, including those held at school sites, at the district level, as well as sports functions, conferences, workshops, and trainings. Board members will refrain from discussing and/or acting on board issues in those settings. In addition, only official meetings are published and other meetings are scheduled. They will be announced in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. And I have already announced the meetings. So that moves us to item number 15.
Mr. President, I make the motion to adjourn.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Stephen Otero. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Frank Otero, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Brian Smith, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And I vote yes.
And I vote yes.
Sorry about that, Mr. Stephen.
Have a good
Meeting
night.
adjourned.